Thank you, Stephen, for leading that song, Angry Words. I have found that in my household, or just when I see someone upset, it's really effective if I just start singing that song to them. And so you should try that this week as we talk about anger this morning. We continue our series on the sermon. As I was prepping for this morning, I began to think about the potentially millions of sermons through the years that have been based around this moment that Jesus had. Just all the sermons that were crafted based on this one sermon, these red letters of Jesus, these words of Jesus, and a profound moment, not just because they're Jesus' words, but it's Jesus establishing himself as Messiah. It's Jesus taking the law which was received on the mountain to this mountainside and saying, I want you to see it from a different perspective. I want to call you to something more. And it's an important text that we look at in this series. I want to read the text to you this morning from Matthew 5. If you'd like to turn there, it'll also be on the screen. And I just want to say to you that if you hear nothing else this morning, just let this text sit on your heart. If you are like me, sometimes I hear book, chapter, verse, and I kind of tune out because I've heard the text before. Or maybe you have 10 kids next to you and you're like, I can't not pay attention. Just leave them for a minute and a half and we'll regroup. Matthew chapter 5. Let God's Spirit speak to your heart. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you're still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. This morning, this is the text that we're thinking about, and it's summed up pretty simply. It's summed up pretty simply. If you get that next slide, it's a simple text in some ways. It's about anger and reconciliation. If you'll entertain me for just a minute and repeat after me, say, I'm a follower of Jesus. I am not mad. I am all about reconciliation. There you have it. That's the text. That's the sermon, but the reality of it is we all have moments. We all have moments where anger takes over the driver's seat. If you've seen the Disney movie Inside Out, you remember sometimes that anger wins over joy and other emotions that we have. Anger gets control every once in a while, and it takes the driver's seat, and you and I just let it have its way. We all have moments. I had a moment one time, and I was really, really angry at my youngest son, Jude, who's now 4. He's 2 in the video I'm about to show you. And in this video, he wanted to remind my family how angry I was at him. And I'm right when he starts the video here, he says, I make Daddy mad. And I'll tell you that so you understand him. But then I'm going to show you about 30 more seconds of the video. And I think there's a couple clues that will show you probably why I was mad. I don't remember why I was mad. But the way he's acting, you'll be like, okay, I get it. And as you watch the video, I want you to watch and see if you can tell where I'm at. See if you can tell my location. Take a look.
What did you say? Why? What did you do? Jude. Can you make Daddy happy? Yeah, you can. Show how to make Daddy happy. Blow him a kiss. Jude.
That is exactly how you make Daddy.
No, take that out. No.
I don't know why I was mad. But he ate a salt packet and knocked over a drink in the little bit that you saw. And so I'm sure that I was. I'm sure that when he's 30 years old and someone says, what do you remember? That he'll remember that. Could you tell where I was? I was at, cue that next slide. I was at the happiest place on earth. I was at Disney World. And I'm sure his core memory will be that from that location. And if you're a parent or you're a person who's paid for it or even thought about paying for it, you know that it's not the happiest place on earth. We all have moments, don't we? We all have those moments where anger takes over. And it's hard to control our emotions. I want to remind you of a few moments where maybe you're like me and anger comes up frequently. Anger comes up quickly in certain moments in our life. Here's an example of one. Maybe for you, it's the road rage. Some of you, the person next to you just elbowed you. They're like, this is the Spirit speaking to you here. This is you. But it's in those moments sometimes, and it's interesting when we're driving because we can't communicate with each other, so we drive more aggressively, right? And it's I need you to go faster, so I'm going to get closer to you in the vehicle I haven't paid off with all my family in it to communicate to you that you need to speed it up just a little bit. It's an interesting moment. There's some stats up here. I'm not going to read them all to you, quite honestly, because they're kind of dark. It's kind of like, man, I don't want to read all those to you guys. The last one, though, is interesting. A 500% increase in road rage over the last 10 years was reported. It's a moment that we all have where sometimes anger literally takes over the driver's seat. How about this one? Maybe it's at a restaurant. Customer service is not quite where you want it to be. I ordered a large fry, not a small fry. Let's get that right. There was this study done. They took the 9 most populated cities in California, and they chose 5 or 6 fast food restaurants, Carl's Jr., McDonald's, some things like that. They pulled all the 911 calls, and it equaled out to around 77,000 calls from fast food restaurants, many of which had to do with customer service. It's a place where sometimes our anger gets the best of us. It's restaurants, fast food. I imagined what that 911 call looked like. 911, what's your emergency? I just put mayonnaise on this guy's burger and he's really upset. We'll send all units out immediately. What could have happened if police didn't have to deal with 77,000 calls to McDonald's? This next one, some of you go to ball games and you see a referee and it's part of the experience for you, popcorn and yelling at the referee, right? I coached 2 basketball games yesterday and this slide just kept lingering in my mind. I was like, hey, you're doing a great job, my man. You're one of the best refs I've ever seen. But it's a place where sometimes anger gets the best of us. I have a friend, he quit reffing about 10 years ago. He started back because he said people kept calling me saying we can't find enough referees and they're paying more. So he started reffing again if you're looking for a career change. He started reffing because there is a shortage of referees based mostly on our behavior at games. But it's tough. It's difficult. It's these moments that we have, these situations that cause anger or tension in us. But sometimes it's just small. As you think about life, you and I have a lot of disagreements. You and I disagree on a lot of things. Sometimes they're small. I'll call this level 1. Sometimes we disagree on simple things, like if I said to you, the best queso in Edmond is at Torchy's. Some of you would go, no, that's not right. Some of you, if I said that Travis Kelce's girlfriend's best song is our song, you would go, Brian, no, that's not right, and I'm offended that you said Travis Kelce's girlfriend. Some of you might disagree on church songs. I'm sure that Stephen has never had any conversation on the number of songs we should sing or which ones. Never happened, right? There's these smaller things we just disagree about. And then there's what I might call the next level. Your friend doesn't text you back. That's a whole sermon series. It's a 4-week series. Some of you need to hear, hey, your friend's not going to text you back. It's okay. And then some of you need to hear, hey, maybe text them back. That's the whole thing. You get home, the fast food order is wrong. I don't mean to talk so much about fast food. I'm passionate about it. Maybe someone gives more than the other person does in a relationship. Maybe your friend did something without you and it hurts. That's a thing that kind of happens from a young age to an old age. We get left out of things and it stings. Someone's words hurt you. Something was said, or maybe you said something. It's become part of our life. Or maybe it's what I might call this level 3. This level 3. Maybe it's about social justice. Something that really, really you're passionate about and someone else isn't as passionate about. Maybe a good cause, but sometimes it brings up a lot of anger in you. Maybe it's politics. We could camp out here for a minute, but I would just say to you, I think you know that sometimes this creates tension in your life. This draws up emotion in our lives, and maybe rightly so, but it's what you and I are called to that we have to talk about this morning. Maybe it's road rage, as I mentioned. Maybe it's friends or family that you constantly are dealing with. Maybe it's sports. Maybe it's church theology, or maybe it's what you think of as church theology when really it's just a matter of your opinion. It's tough, though. We have these disagreements and these many levels to it. All these things, from the road rage to the politics, to the friends and family, to the spouse, to the children, to the coworker, all the things, and you and I have to respond to them every single day. We have to respond every day. And it matters how we respond. I ran into this article that gave us a look at how people respond to different things. Some of us respond simply by our anger. We bring our temper in. We are a maniac when it comes to certain things. Temper lies right there. Anger lies right beneath. And sometimes we respond quickly. If you want conflict, some of us are there for the conflict. We're looking for it. We enjoy it. It's part of how some of us respond. Some of us might just back away and not say anything at all. Which you might go, well, Brian, it says slow to speak in the passage. We'll actually look at that in a moment. But again, in this sermon, over and over again, Jesus is speaking to issues of the heart. And so while it might be appropriate to be quiet in certain situations, if you're stepping back to be quiet while the anger remains in your heart, maybe it's a place where you have to kind of wrestle with it, right? You know what type of person you are. I'll back away. I'm not going to say anything about it. That's the right thing to do when we let this anger settle in here. Or maybe it's this other one. Maybe you're the manipulator. Maybe your response is the sarcasm. Maybe your response is the passive-aggressive behavior that you think no one realizes what's going on, but it's pretty clear what you're communicating. Maybe you've got the jokes. Maybe you try to play mind games, but we have to respond. You and I have to respond. It's become normal, or maybe it always has been. I don't talk to them anymore. I don't know what that person's deal is, but I'm done with them. I don't think they like me. If they're going to be part of that thing, well, then I'm done. I'm not talking to them. They posted this thing the other day, and I'm just kind of done. It's tough. The disagreements we have, the things that cause anger to come up are tough to deal with. And as we look at Matthew chapter 5, Jesus has these moments in here where he warns us. And it's interesting because some part of me wants to go, well, hang on. Now we have these moments where we see God was angry. We have this Jesus in the temple moment. Anger is an emotion, and certainly all those are true. But when I simplify things and I just go, well, I'm going to look at this text, Jesus gives us some warnings, and it's clear that it really, really, really matters how you and I respond. He says these warnings in this text. I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Jesus is serious of what he calls us to control our anger and reconciliation with people. It's this moment, as I mentioned earlier in this text. It's the first of 6 statements where Jesus says, you've heard it said this way, but I'm telling you it's this way. You have heard it said, do not murder, but I'm reminding you it's about anger. Randy Harris says it this way: you haven't killed anyone today, but how is your anger? You haven't killed anyone today, but when I say this name, how is your anger? You haven't killed anyone today, but if I bring up this topic, how is your anger? Jesus is trying to not just tell us, hey, don't get angry, but he's trying to remind us and give us a glimpse of the heart of God. As I was thinking about reconciliation and forgiveness, I was reminded of one of our greatest theologians, Mr. Rogers. And I kind of say that jokingly, but as I think about it, I'm like, actually, Mr. Rogers was a great theologian. He says this quote about forgiveness from one of his teachers: there's only one thing evil cannot stand, and that is forgiveness. I love that thought. Sometimes as we think about good and evil and we think about following God, we think about reading our Bible and praying, but the weapon of forgiveness is powerful in our world. The weapon of forgiveness is powerful. But he also reminded us of this. He says, this next slide, he says, forgiveness is a strange thing. It can sometimes be easier to forgive our enemies than our friends. It can be hardest of all to forgive the people that we love. And isn't that so true? Isn't that so true that sometimes those closest to us, it becomes difficult? It's tough to wrestle with. But you and I have to be people who are about forgiveness. Ephesians 4 calls us to forgive as God forgave. We have to be reminded of it. C.S. Lewis says, to be Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. He calls us to something. He calls us to control our anger and our emotions. He calls us to this place of reconciliation. And in the text of Matthew 5, Jesus tells us 3 pieces of wisdom, 3 steps, if you will, but 3 pieces of wisdom. The first one he reminds us about, as we read earlier, he says you need to choose your words wisely. You need to choose your words wisely. As you think about day to day and you think about reconciliation, he says it really matters how you respond. It really matters before you hit send on the text or email, before you post, before you meet with someone and speak to them. It really matters. He says again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. Anyone who says you fool will be in danger of the fire of hell. He says, choose your words wisely. Think about what you're going to say in all these moments. Then he gives us this other piece of wisdom, and he says, there's some urgency to it. There's some urgency to it. He says, not just once or twice, but 3 times, he says, settle matters quickly while you're still together. Leave your gift at the altar, as if to say, if you're sitting here in worship this morning, if you need to reconcile with someone, you can go do that now. You can't, because we're only on step 2, so hang tight. But he says there's some urgency in this. There's some urgency in this. I've mentioned this story before, but it just fits so well. I'm going to tell it to you again. My mom has this conflict with a really close friend over a church matter. They separate. They go to different churches. They don't talk again. 25 years, you fast forward, my mom is laying on her deathbed, and this woman shows up at the house. She comes in, and her and mom sit for a couple hours, and they reconcile whatever mattered 25 years ago does not matter anymore. Sometimes the thing that you and I sit with, when we really stop and think about it, just doesn't matter that much. When you think of it in the light of eternity, and you think about it through the lens of the Sermon on the Mount, it just really doesn't matter that much. But I think about the years of friendship that they missed. I think about how they had a timetable. They knew what was happening in the moment so they could reconcile, that we're not always guaranteed, but he calls us to do it urgently. He says, let's not let these days go by. Let's not even an evening go by. Reconcile. And then this third piece of wisdom is just simple. He says reconciliation matters. It matters. Can I tell you something? Whatever you're upset about, whatever bothers you, there's a really good shot that you're right. There's a really good chance that you are correct. I've thought about, man, it'd be cool. Maybe we could form a committee here at church. Just get 10 people together. You could come in and go, hey, here's this scenario. He said this, and I just really think he shouldn't have said it. And the committee can go, yeah, you're right, or you're wrong. Wouldn't that be helpful? Maybe we can put that together. There's a good chance that you're right. You may have been hurt. Someone may have said something that really bothered you. It may be even deeper than that. But in this text that we're looking at, it doesn't talk about that. It just says that you and I are about reconciliation. I was with a friend of mine a few years ago, church leader, and he says, who is that person over there? I said, oh, that's so-and-so. He goes, that's what I thought. He goes, I need to talk to them. And he starts walking over, and I go with him just because I'm nosy, and I walk over. And he kind of reintroduces himself. He says, hey, I'm this person. We know each other this way. We talked for a few minutes. And then he says this. He says, hey, like 15 years ago, there was a church thing, and it was about this. And he says, I just wanted you to know, I never felt like we handled that right. I want you to know that I'm sorry. I think we could have done that differently. And the person said, I really appreciate you saying that. That has bothered me for a really long time. And I just thought, man, what a great moment to witness. What a great moment to witness as you could see the gospel at work. What a powerful weapon that took place there. We can choose to reconcile, or we can hold on. We can hold on to this thing and carry it with us. Nelson Mandela has some of the greatest thoughts on forgiveness, who was wrongly imprisoned for a lot of life. He says resentment's like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. Forgiveness liberates the soul. It removes fear. That's why it's such a powerful weapon. This idea of forgiveness matters. I ran into this story a few years ago of this guy named Sakriksa Him. It's a tough story, quite honestly. It's a story that's hard to tell a little bit. He's 13, he's 14 years old, many years ago in Cambodia, living life, all his life in this village, all he owns in this village, all his people in this village, and a group of soldiers comes through. Group of pirates, if you will. They come through and they take everything. And when I say they take everything, I mean they take everything. They thought they even got him, and he sneaks away. And he watches from afar as his village goes away. And he vowed in that moment in his mind, in his heart, he said, I'll be back. I'm coming to find them. I'll be back. And he begins day by day recounting all the things that happened and all that was taken from him. And he begins to just think about the revenge. He leaves Cambodia. He ends up in a refugee camp for 5 years in Thailand. Really, really bad 5 years. He leaves Thailand. He ends up in Canada. And he meets this man, or he's reminded of this man named Jesus. Again, years of just, I'm coming back. And as he meets this man named Jesus and he settles in on his words and he lets them sink into his heart, he begins to go, man, I've consumed a lot of time and energy and mind power thinking about revenge. He's right. Most of us would go, man, you have a right to be angry. He sets up a meeting with some of the soldiers. They think it's a setup. Even they think he's right. They know. He walks into the meeting, shakes their hand, he gives them a hug, and he says, I just needed you to know that I'm done thinking about this, and I forgive you. That's not to say that the thought didn't keep coming up. The hurt went away. He just needed to know that the forgiveness was there. He said, in time, I discovered that forgiveness opens a channel for real spiritual power to work in my life, a power which brings healing and wholeness. See, when you and I choose forgiveness, we allow God further into our hearts. We're no longer dragging this thing around. Sometimes we're searching for God and trying to figure out why we can't connect, when sometimes it's about forgiveness. We have to constantly be grateful for our own forgiveness. We don't forgive because people that deserve it. We forgive because we didn't deserve it. It's this constant gratefulness that we have. This idea of grace is this crazy idea that you and I have to teach. It might be difficult. You might be right. But Jesus is calling us to be people that are about that. The reason I love his story is partly that it's a really powerful story on forgiveness. He took it a step further. You know what he did? He started a ministry. All the ministry does is spread stories about forgiveness like his. He just tells people stories on both sides of forgiveness. And I thought, man, what a powerful life to forgive someone when really no one thought you should. But then on top of that, just to make the world know about forgiveness. That's what you and I are supposed to do. That's what we're called to. Romans 12:18. If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. James 1. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. It's these passages. You see, it's not just about Matthew 5. It's the whole story and all the scriptures that add to it. It is God's message for our world. It is death, burial, and resurrection reiterated. Repeat after me. I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm not mad. And I'm all about reconciliation. Psalms 103. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his steadfast love towards those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far does he remove our transgressions from us. It's the whole story. As Jesus hung on the cross, Luke 23, one of his last sayings from the cross, he says, forgive them. A message for that moment, but a message to remind you of the whole story. I got this email this week on Thursday. It was from one of those emails that I should have unsubscribed to a long time ago. You know, you get those and you just keep deleting them for like years. I get it, and the subject line says this: the complexities of forgiveness. I got it on Thursday. I was like, okay, I'll click it. I open it up, and it's this article about how difficult it is to forgive and how complex it is to forgive. And I was just reminded of how difficult it is. You see, for some of us, I joke about the disagreements of the small ones, but honestly, I know. Like, I know that your story is way beyond that. I know it may be involved with trauma. It may be really, really messy. It may be really, really difficult. I get it. I know that. It's really tough. And some of those things, actually, I don't know. I don't know your story. I don't know the hurt that came with it. I don't know the words that came with it. I don't know the tears that came with it. I just know that it's really difficult. I know it's hard. But I also know that's what Jesus has called us to. It's so difficult. I want to close this with a prayer here. If you could show that next slide, I believe we have a picture of this flyer. This week, I want you to think about, how do I work through some of these things? But they're tough things. And I want to close this in prayer because I think that through some of these things, you and I need to walk with God through them before we walk with other people through them. And it may be the reconciliation with the other person, but quite honestly, it may just be whatever you've been angry about for a while. Maybe it's something at work or something at home. What is it that irritates you day in and day out, week after week, that you sit with? You may think of a name, but you may think of a situation too. I'd like us to pray about it. I want to do it just a little bit differently this morning. I'm going to let you have some time to pray, and I'm going to guide you through this prayer. And then I'll close this, and then we'll offer our invitation song. If you would bow with me, I'm going to tell you a few things to pray about as you bow. Let's pray together. To start off, I just want you to pray for the person that maybe you thought about. Not about them, pray for them. Now I want you to pray, if it's not about a person, the subject or the thing that keeps making you angry. Pray about that. I want you to ask God for courage in these situations. Now I want you to ask God for the love and the grace and the mercy and the forgiveness and the patience that He gave you, that you could have those same things with these situations. Now I want you to ask God that he walk with you through all these things. God, we walk this earth and we find it really difficult sometimes to forgive, to control our anger and our emotions. God, to reconcile things with people. It is so, so hard in certain situations. But God, help us this week to be convicted of the calling that you've given us, to be followers and disciples of yours, to be people who are about reconciliation. God, the truth of it is we are mad sometimes. We are angry, and God, help us as we walk through that. God, walk with us. Give us courage to walk through it. God, give us the love and grace and mercy and patience that you gave to us. God, I pray for those who are hurt. God, help them to know that you are with them. But God, help us to be called to be people who are peacemakers and peacekeepers, who are about forgiveness, about reconciliation, who God, look different to our world because we are about those things. God, help us to live that life. Father, we love you. And we praise you and we thank you for the message that you gave us, the story that you gave us that is all about reconciliation. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. If you have a need this morning, come now as we stand, as we sing.